When I was asked to review the Pink Faun Scion streamer transport, I felt both excited and a little uneasy. Excited because this is a $20,000 machine, a serious piece of audio engineering. Uneasy because the Scion is purely a streamer with no DAC, and I wonder whether it could really sound different from a $200 streamer. After all, in theory, a streamer is just sending ones and zeros to the DAC, so how could it possibly change the sound? Still, I decided to keep an open mind. I'm not an engineer, so rather than speculating about the technical why, I focused on what I could actually hear. I also had another reason for saying yes to this review. See, a recent experience that made me rethink what a streamer can do.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. If you enjoy our videos, you might also like our other work for audiophiles and music lovers. Written equipment reviews, editor's choice ratings, product news, and music reviews. Get the latest each week with a free subscription to our email newsletters. A link is in the description.
So recently I stopped by a friend's place to check out his newly acquired esoteric CD transport. Now it's strictly a transport, no built-in DAC, and he has it connected to a dual DAC setup, one dedicated to the left channel and one to the right channel. Now interestingly, his computer is also hooked up to the same pair of DACs. So he played me a CD through the transport, then the same album ripped to his computer. And what surprised me was how much better the CD transport sounded. It wasn't like a subtle difference, easily a tier or two above. Now both were sending the same 1 and 0 to the same DACs, yet the sound from the transport was clearly superior. And by the way, his whole system cost like 300 grand. So that experience is why I agreed to review the Scion streamer. I wanted to see if I could recreate the same level of surprise at home, comparing a $20,000 plus streamer to my trusty $1,000 computer. Now the sound would have to completely blow me away, otherwise I'll pack it up and send it back without a review. It couldn't simply sound a bit better. I think I hear a difference. Maybe the mid-range has more clarity. No, it had to give me one of those take my money now moments. So 10 seconds after powering up the Scion, that moment came. Now I have hundreds of pieces of gear coming through my system over the years, and only a handful have truly exceeded my expectations, and the Scion was one of them. Now, maybe it's because my expectations for streamers were low, or maybe the Scion is genuinely that good. Good question. Okay, so before this review, I wasn't familiar with Pink Faun. Now, the company is based in the Netherlands and it has a strong following in Europe. Now, interestingly, when my audio buddies dropped by, they recognized the brand immediately. Now, they even brought along a few Pink Faun power cables for me to try. Okay, to avoid sparkling a heated debate in the comments, I'm just going to say this about the cables. They're pretty good. Alright, the Pink Faun Scion is the company's newest entry into the high-end digital audio world. It weighs 15 kilograms, has both the heft and the understated elegance to anchor a series system without drawing unnecessary attention, right? Looks simple. The chassis feels rock solid, featuring a fully passive cooling design and no moving parts, which is great because I really don't want to hear any fan noise during quiet passages. Now, according to Pink Faun's website, the Scion uses a dual regulated power supply system supported by a secondary high transient low noise supercapacitor based power supply. Now, that could be their secret sauce, the power supply design and those supercapacitors. Because underneath it all, the Scion is essentially a computer. It's powered by an AMD CPU equipped with 64 gigs of DDR5 RAM, which is actually more than my own video editing rig. Storage starts at 1 terabyte, but you can expand it to 4 terabyte or even 8 terabyte for those with large musical libraries. So the Scion's design is very simple. Now, although the design is simple, the finishing feels premium. Now, I like how they CNC the logo on top, and in the front, there is a logo on the right of it, and a light indicating whether it is on or on standby. Now, there's a small power button hidden underneath the bottom in the front. Now, at the back, you have the standard power plug. For connectivity, the Scion offers Ethernet, but no Wi-Fi. Now, that makes sense. If you're investing over 20 grand in a streamer, you're likely aiming for the best possible sound quality, and a wired Ethernet connection is still the gold standard. For outputs, it provided USB and SPDIF. Now, for my evaluation, I used the USB connection. Now, it supports the SMB network protocol and is fully room ready. In fact, you'll need room to operate the Scion, as it doesn't support services like Tidal Connect. Okay, so let's talk about why the Scion completely blew me away. The short answer is, the sound. It's neutral with a hint of warmth, free from excessive coloration or digital glare. Now, when my audio buddy, I'm going to call him Mr. Quad because he owns a pair of quads. Now, when he first heard it, his reaction was immediate. Everything sounded better. He was just as shocked as I was. Now, normally he's quick to point out a few specific improvements when comparing gear, but this was the first time I ever heard him say, everything sounded better. Okay, in my case, after spending some real quality time with the Scion in my own setup, I can pinpoint a few specific improvements that I think is worth your attention. The first that struck me was the total lack of harshness. There's no sharp edges. Everything sounded smoother. Yet, transient stayed crisp and articulate. Instrument separation was another major highlight. And I'm not talking about a small upgrade. It was striking, especially on tracks that highlight spatial cues. Now, so let's take the song Birds by Dominic Fils-Aimé. Everybody knows that song, right? So it features a double bass-like percussion, sparse hand claps, deliberately arranged to emphasize the space around the vocal. Now, I heard the song like a gazillion times, but with the Scion in my system, man, the sense of space was so realistic that I ended up playing the entire album instead of just a few tracks, which I usually do when I evaluate gear. As if forget it, I'm just going to listen to the whole album. That's because I was so in awe how defined each instrument was. Timing, man, showed a clear improvement. Instruments and vocals exhibited sharper attacks and cleaner decays. Now, giving the music a more defined rhythmic flow. Dynamics stood out as well. The bass carried greater weight and presence. Overall, the sound remained, yes, essentially neutral, but leaned gently towards the warm side, so adding a touch of richness. Next, with the Scion in the system, the background is darker. And this allows the detail to effortlessly emerge. Now, this clarity was especially striking when I listened to Vincent Bélanger's new album, Songe. Now, regarding this album, I was fortunate to witness both the rehearsal and recording sessions. The album featured 5 key sound elements: the soprano vocalist, harp, double bass, violin, and cello. That's 4, right? Interestingly, the 5th instrument is actually the church itself. Vincent intentionally chose the church venue to capture its natural echo and reverberation as part of the music. So that is why the album was recorded in a church. Now, with the Scion streamer in my system, maybe the dark background, I noticed the church atmosphere and the faint reverberation came through more naturally. And regarding instrument separation, right? Remember I mentioned my friend that at the beginning of this video that owns that $300,000 system running that dual DAC? When I say the instruments on his setup are clearly separated, I mean they're so defined that it feels like you could trace the edges with a knife. Every time I listen to his system, then return home to mine, everything sounded like a bit blurry and jumbled. But with the Scion in place, my system finally felt a step closer to that kind of clarity and separation. Now, finally, I want to emphasize what I mentioned earlier. My system sounds smoother with the Scion in the chain. It's not that the high frequencies are rolled off, far from it, but there are no harsh edges anymore. I realize I'm repeating myself, but I just can't get over how much more pleasant my system sounds with the Scion. All right, so enough flowers. Let's talk about the pros and cons. Okay, the cons. The front light indicator does not clearly show whether the system is on or in standby mode, because the brightness difference between on and standby is like minimal. You know, I usually rely on the red light visible through the top vent to confirm that the unit is powered on correctly. Of course, I can tell with the front light if I pay attention, but man, I'm getting too old for this and my eyesight is not what it used to be. So that's the first con. Second, after pressing the power button, it takes about 1 minute for my phone to detect the streamer. Now, initially I thought, okay, is there a problem? My phone's not seeing the streamer, because, you know, who reads the manual these days? But after a while, I go like, oh yeah, it needs to boot up. So, oh, by the way, I still haven't read the manual. So after that, once I understand that it needs time to boot up, everything is okay. Now, the streamer also requires you to use Roon as the streaming platform. Now, Roon is fantastic, and many users, man, once they use it, they'll never go back. But it requires $15 a month or a one-time $829 lifetime subscription fee. So if you're buying this Scion, factor that in, okay? Now, given you have to use Roon, if you're one of those who use your hi-fi system to watch YouTube, well, you're out of luck. Then again, who spends 20 grand on a streamer just to watch YouTube, right? Okay, so let's go with the pros now. Okay, if you want hassle-free streaming setup, this is fantastic. So once I know, okay, it takes time to boot up from Roon to connect, man, the system has been rock solid, reliable, consistently. And for those investing 20 grand in a streamer, reliability for me is like number one, top of the most important. And the Scion is reliable. And setup took less than a minute. Personally, I use Tidal, and through Roon, I can easily access my entire Tidal library. So the first time I power Roon, waited, oh, there we go, Scion. So there is a slight learning curve, but the interface, the Roon interface, is quite intuitive and user-friendly. So if your goal is to elevate your system's sound performance, then yeah, get this unit. All right, so that's it. Let's wrap up the video with another story. Okay, you know, over the past few years, I faced an annoying issue where my system sometimes sound harsh. So much so that, oh man, I had to turn it off. Interestingly, I noticed it doesn't happen at night often, which made me suspect maybe it's the electricity, right? But despite having a dedicated power line at my home, my voltage still fluctuate between 119 volt and 124 volt. So I tried power conditioners, switch off everything else in the house, but the harshness would come and go. And a friend told me they experienced the same thing, right? Sounds better at night. So I chalk it up as normal. Then recently, late one night, when my system sounded a bit bright, you know, I decided to call it quits and turn it off. Out of curiosity, I switched from my computer to the Scion streamer, and to my surprise, the sound was silky smooth. This made me rethink my earlier assumption that electricity was the culprit affecting my DAC, my preamp, or power amp. And it turns out the key difference was the Scion was plugged to my dedicated power line, while my computer was not. It was connected to my regular line. Oh, by the way, I know there's a difference between that, my regular line and my dedicated line. Because when I plug my 2 amp into the normal line, I hear a speaker hiss, but it's silent on my dedicated line. Now, I never paid much attention before because after all, you know, I thought computer was just sending 0 and 1 to the DAC. How much could where it plugged in matter? Now, my only regret that night was that when I plugged in the Scion, I ended up listening to it instead of plug my computer right away to the dedicated line to see if it made a difference. Now, I have plugged my computer into my dedicated line and I'm still waiting for it to sound harsh. I don't know yet. It's only been a few days. So the takeaway, don't underestimate how your source can impact the sound. Even a streamer transport like the Scion can enhance your system's performance significantly. My audio buddy, Mr. Quad, who I mentioned before, who always thought streamers are not that important, but rather the DAC is more important, left at that saying, man, this makes me rethink what I know about transports. All right, guys, till next time.